it's okay to be the new person. It's okay to not be the most experienced.
It was inspiring to hear that people are in the same boat as you.
It has truly changed the trajectory of my career and who I am as a nurse.
I want to bring back the voice of the bedside nurse.
Think about what it is you want to do in your career and find your place.
I would say that there's not one best. It's not a cookie cutter. One doesn't fit each individual.
This is a perfect example of you get what you put into it.
You need to start somewhere and start with what sparks your interest first and then move on from there.
I don't know that I want someone doing something the same way they've been doing it for 25 years.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the New Jersey Nursing Insights podcast. I'm Sue Weaver, and with me is my co-host, Daria Waszak.
We're your hosts from the New Jersey Collaborating Center for Nursing, and we're excited to get right to it. Today, we're having another conversation about the value of professional nursing organizations.
That's right, Daria. And I'm happy to welcome my friends and colleagues, Deb Prinzo and Tracy Vitale. Let's get started by having Deb introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you, Sue and Daria, for having me on this podcast. My name is Deb Prinzo. I am a leader at Hackensack Meridian Health, and I've been with the organization about 36 years. It just was in May.
Wow. And Tracy Vitale, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. My name is Tracy Vitale, and I'm the Associate Dean for Clinical Affairs for the School of Nursing at Rutgers University. And I've been with Rutgers about 10 years.
Okay, let's get started. You might have heard a colleague say, I'm a member of a professional organization. And maybe you wondered, wow, that sounds like it costs money. Is it really worth the dues? So today, we're going to let you decide. Stick with us as we chat with Deb and Tracy to explore what membership in a professional organization means to them. So I'd like to start by asking Deb, can you tell us about your career and what inspired you to join a professional organization?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, I've been with Hackensack Meridian for 36 years. So that has been my whole career. I've been with this organization since I finished nursing school. And it's funny when you ask about the nursing organizations. As a student nurse, I recall us being signed up for during our schooling for the Student Nurses Association organization. And I never really knew what that was about. It was just something that the school signed us up for. So it was not until I was midway, about 6 years into my career, that I had an incident that occurred, and it pushed me to investigate some evidence-based practices that I needed to implement into our practice here at our facility. And one of the organizations that I came across, because it was infusion related, was the Infusion Nurses Society. I didn't join right away, but I did investigate and look into some standards of practice that they had and some guidelines that we could use here at our facility. And then I became a member shortly after. And I have to say that, you talked earlier about the dues and is it worth it? For this particular one, it's about $125 a year. If you break it down, it's about $10 a month. We spend more than that on our coffee or tea on our way to work, right? So it's really not a huge financial investment, but you have to look at it as more of an investment into your growth as a nurse and your learning and all of the things that they can offer to you. Even if you want to just look at it as the CEs that you can obtain free from the organization. We need them to renew our nursing license every year or every 2 years. And you can get those for being part of the organization versus having to pay for CEs when the clock is ticking and it's time to renew. So I have never looked at it as being a financial burden for me per se.
So you mentioned something happened at the 6-year mark of your career. Can you elaborate on that? What happened that made you investigate and find the Infusion Nurses Society?
So I was a new nurse in my role in the outpatient infusion department. And at that time, we were beginning to see patients who needed oncology treatments, chemotherapy. And so we were doing treatment training and getting certified through our organization after we've taken some classes through the Oncology Nurses Society. And I was doing my practicum in order to get certified to administer chemotherapy. And then an unfortunate event occurred. It's hard to talk about all the time, but it's a story that I like to share because I know other nurses out there might come across this in their career and know that you can bounce back from it and you could move on and you need to educate yourself. In short, the patient had an implanted port inserted. At that time, back in the 90s, we did not have anything in our policy other than the surgeon clearing us to use that catheter. And we knew that you needed to have a blood return when you gave chemotherapy. That's basically what we knew as a nurse. And this particular patient had a less than brisk blood return, I'll say today because I know more now, but she did not have a great blood return, but she did have a blood return. It turned out after administering her treatment for her for the day, and everything went smoothly during the treatment administration. She tolerated it well. I had a blood return after every couple of mLs that I infused of the medication. And I got a call the next day from the leader that was training me and doing my certification to say that there was an unfortunate event that the patient wound up in the emergency room that evening after we had given her her treatment. And the port tip of the catheter was not in our vascular access area. It was not in her subclavian or even superior vena cava where it should have been. It was in her pleural cavity. And so all of that chemo that I administered went into her pleural cavity. She underwent several surgical interventions, removal of part of her lung. And it was devastating, not only for her, but for myself to know that I did this to her. And so I made it my mission to make a change. And we did make a change to our policy based on some information that I received from the Infusion Nurses Society that we didn't use a catheter unless we had a chest x-ray confirmation of the tip before the first use and that we had a brisk blood return. And when I say brisk, you can tell the difference between a brisk return and a blood return. And in this particular instance, it was not a brisk one. And so that was the beginning, I guess, of my journey. You could look at it as it was an unfortunate event for me, but it didn't stop me. It actually made me want to find out what are the best practices that we should be doing and try to implement that here at our site.
Well, thanks for sharing that experience. What did you learn from INS? Did they have standards or?
So back then, I don't know that they were called standards. I think they may have been called guidelines, and then they have evolved over the years. At the time, I had found it through our librarian doing searches for me, and they put out this journal with guidelines in there and practice guidelines that were based on evidence. And as the years went on and I became a member of INS, they put out a journal. At that time, it was every 5 years, and now it's up to every 3 years that they're putting out standards of practice for us to be able to rely on. And I currently have it on my desk, every version. It has many multiple flags on it for areas that I have to look up. And we do use and base our policies, any IV related policies here at our facility based on those standards of practice. So it's an ongoing learning opportunity to be part of an organization that is constantly updating based on current standards and evidence that's out there.
Well, thanks for sharing. And I have to share also that I'm a member of the Infusion Nurses Society, not as long as you have been probably, but I was always most grateful for those standards of practice because when you're writing policies and procedures, you don't have to search the literature. It's right there in the standards.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks. So now let's hear from Tracy. Can you tell us about your career and how you got involved with a professional organization?
Sure. Thank you. So my background has always been in obstetrical nursing, and I really enjoyed it. I really put myself out there. I think one of the qualities that no matter what I do in my life always seems to be me looking for more answers and trying to learn from other people. So in doing that, I've surrounded myself with leaders that I can learn from, whether they're educators, whether they're managers, clinical coordinators. So I create that professional network within my job. And then through that opportunity, through that experience, they have really lifted me and exposed me to those professional opportunities, whether it was within the units in training me to be a charge nurse, cross training me to another department within the women's division. And in doing that, in having that leadership development for those clinical roles, they saw in me opportunities to be involved with professional organizations. So when I was working in a labor and delivery department, our director had said to me, I'd like to invite you to the Organization of Nurse Executives of New Jersey at the time, before they were ONL. They were ONE. And she invited me as her guest to come to the organization's annual meeting to see what it's all about. And it was really interesting because at the time, I felt like an outsider. I did not consider myself a nurse executive. I was a frontline staff nurse who occasionally filled in as the charge nurse. I had aspirations of being a clinical coordinator, and those pieces were in movement at the time, but I wasn't sure that I belonged in the organization. And what I realized is by being her guest at that meeting, there was an opportunity for me to grow professionally and grow into future leadership roles. So that was really, in addition to Deb's experience with being in the Student Nurses Association as a student, that was really my first exposure to a professional nursing organization. And I have to say, they welcomed me with open arms. I was very forthright in saying, I'm not really sure I belong here, but they said, you absolutely do. And one of their first questions was, what do you want to be when you grow up? How do we help you get there? And at the time, the annual meetings that ONE had, it included having breakout meetings with the different organization committees. So they said, what committee is most interesting to you? So I had picked the mentorship committee, and I just sat and I listened to what they were doing and their plans to have mentor-mentee cohort to help with leadership development. And that's when I was all in. I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I said, I need to be a part of this organization. And it really took off from there. I think the opportunities that I've had with being a member of the organization and the encouragement and the network that comes from the organization has really brought me to where I am today in terms of where I work, what I do, the education that I've obtained since that first annual meeting. It has truly changed the trajectory of my career and who I am as a nurse. And it's just been amazing.
Wow, that's really cool how your leader brought you to that annual meeting, and that just was the start of your journey and membership in the organization. And have you done that with others? Have you been that leader to inspire others to join?
I have. I've encouraged all of colleagues of mine to also, when I was in the hospital setting, encourage them to find an organization that's important to you. Think about what it is you want to do in your career and find your place, because it always ends up being so much more than you anticipate it to be. The networking, the opportunities, the continuing education, the professional development that the organizations have really are so much more than you can anticipate. And I did that when I was in the hospital setting. I now do that with my students and my colleagues and say, think about where you want to be. Align yourself with what you anticipate, your future goals to be. And it's okay to be the new person. It's okay to not be the most experienced or the most proficient in something, because those are the people that you're going to learn from.
Great. Well, we've learned a little bit about how each of you have started your journeys being actively involved in nursing organizations. Let's talk a little bit more broadly about the value nursing organizations bring. There are some nurses not involved in any professional organizations, or perhaps they pay the dues and renew, but they don't actively participate. What are they missing if they're not either in an organization or actively participating?
I have to be honest, I was one of them. I had originally joined because I was looking for some information, right? And I would do the CEs. I would take the opportunity to utilize the things that I felt that I needed at the time. It wasn't until I attended, as Tracy was saying, I attended one of the annual meetings that were pretty close to home. So it was something that I could drive to. They are scattered about throughout the country, but I had attended one. And the amount of people that you meet that are in the same boat as you is amazing. I would consider myself probably more of an introvert than an extrovert. And I was sitting next to some girl and I said, "Where are you from?" And she was from Philadelphia. And we just kind of hit it off because we were in the same area. And we just started talking about, "Hey, did you know that they have this? And can you look this up?" And we went to a couple of different sessions together. And it was inspiring to hear that people are in the same boat as you. Like Tracy said, don't be afraid to join. Don't be afraid to reach out. Going to the annual meetings and hearing the speakers, some of them, it was their first time speaking. I spoke and did a presentation maybe within the last 10 years was the first time. I was nervous as all get out, but I was able to share with nurses that are going through the same thing. We were implementing some changes here at our facility with PIC insertions, and we started using ECG technology. And that was my first presentation. And I was so anxious to stand up there and do the presentation. But the feedback that I got afterwards and the people who reached out to me saying, "Hey, we were looking into this too." And so that networking does happen and you share that information. And now you become invigorated to keep going on and going to those. I've invited one of my vascular access nurses. She's new to her role within the last 2 years. She's coming with me next year as my guest to the conference because I want her to feel that. I want her to soak it all in. You know, not only just getting the CEs and the standards, that's not enough. You know, you really want to get out there and do that networking and meet people that are doing the same thing that you're doing and piquing the interest. And maybe sparking something for you to bring back to your own organization to make a change or implement something new.
Great. Like the opportunities for professional networking, mentorship, sharing resources, but then, as you mentioned, also opportunities to present your own work to others. That's tremendous. And Tracy, you kind of touched on some opportunities that nursing organizations bring earlier. Do you have anything else to add about the value?
Yeah, I think this is a perfect example of you get what you put into it. I think it's easy to say, "Oh, I pay the annual fee and I'm a member, but I don't really get anything out of it." Well, if you're not putting anything into it, you might not. So I think that I would encourage nurses to not only be a part of a professional organization because of the benefits of the continuing ed, the professional development, the networking opportunity, the opportunity for growth within yourself, the opportunity to really influence practice, influence policy, and make an impact on what we do on a day-to-day basis, no matter what your area of expertise is so significant with the organizations. I think that as nurses, we know that we're considered for decades now the most trusted profession. As nurses, we are the leaders. We lead patient care. We spend the most time with our patients. So with that comes a little bit of responsibility. And you can build on that responsibility, build on that credibility by being an active member in a professional organization. And one of the things that I've done within my own membership is I try and keep it fresh. When I talked about joining ONE and immediately looking towards that mentorship committee, that's where my spark was. That's where I found my interest. I enjoyed it. I was a part of that committee for several years, became the co-chair and then the chair of the committee. But then I was looking for something else. So I switched committees. And that was an opportunity for me to learn and really think outside of my usual box. Sitting on a committee, on a policy committee, that was really not in my wheelhouse at the time, was a way for me to grow and to learn something different and to interact with different people. The membership for a lot of our professional organizations is big. There's hundreds of members, but I always found myself with the same 20, 30 members. But this was a way for me to really increase the network, meet new people, think differently, hear different perspectives. So I think that that's another opportunity that we have with membership in professional organizations, because these professional organizations have the ability to impact how we practice as nurses or as nurse leaders.
Great, thank you. And I love that example of being able to consider it like a growth opportunity, trying a new committee. You're not stuck in one committee once you start becoming active in one committee.
Our guests today are quite humble. They haven't shared that they are both on the board of directors of their professional organization. So let's start with Tracy. How did you make that leap from being involved in two committees to running for the board of director position at the Organization of Nurse Leaders of New Jersey?
So I would say it's a combination of my own self-motivation of wanting to advance my leadership opportunities, but also the support of folks that were on the board at the time and encouraging me to do so. I think there's always a little bit of self-doubt of, am I prepared for this role? Am I prepared for the next step? Do I have the experience or the expertise for it? And sometimes that little bit of self-doubt is enough to prevent me from trying to take that next step. But then when I have friends and colleagues like Sue Weaver to say, hey, are you going to run for the board of directors? You should do it. We want you to be a part of this. You really have a lot to contribute. That's really a lot of positive reinforcement and encouragement to do it. So that in combination is really what drove me to the next level. And then to be able to continue to inspire those behind me. When you talk about how do you encourage other people, or do you encourage other people to be a part of the organization? I feel like it then becomes my role to be a role model for others and say, it's not okay to just be a member, be an active member. I'm very comfortable with my committee involvement. What's the next step? And how do I pursue that? And then I've been able to do that outwards in other professional organizations. So I've been able to do that with ONL through a lot of encouragement and support. I've been able to be engaged with the New Jersey Collaborating Center for Nursing and now sit on their board as the board secretary. Sue, you encouraged me to get involved with the New Jersey State Nurses Association and be involved with their policy and practice committee. So I feel I have that leadership intention, but sometimes we just need some support from our friends, knowing that they're with us, that they're supporting us, they have faith in us to take that next step. And then support you. I mean, in essence, you don't want to feel like they're helping you reach that bar, but expecting you to do it by yourself. There's always the support to help us not only reach that bar, but jump over it.
So I have one other question for you about the board position at ONL. Were you nervous at all? Were you in a formal leadership position? Like, I always thought for ONL, you had to be a manager, director, CNO, but you weren't in one of those roles, or were you, when you ran for the board? And can you just talk about what role you were in, and were you nervous, like still felt that I didn't belong?
Yeah, I was very nervous. I did have a formal leadership role. I think I was either the clinical coordinator or the assistant nurse manager. They did a title change when I first became a board member. But I was a little nervous and intimidated because most of the other board members were chief nursing officers. And I wasn't sure if I fit into the group. I just wasn't sure that I would have what was necessary to make meaningful contribution. But I did. And I think there was value in hearing some of the frontline perspectives that I brought from being so closely aligned with the staff. I wasn't as removed from that as some of the other board members. So I thought that bringing that different perspective was helpful and it was appreciated. I think that that's really key with thinking about those in leadership positions, that they're receptive to the different perspectives, because it could have been a very, very different experience. And now being in academia, it's the same thing. I worry about, am I too far removed from the hospital settings to bring meaningful perspective? But in actuality, I do feel my voice is valued because I'm working with undergraduate and graduate students who are going to be entering the workforce and are going to need to be able to meet the expectations of folks in other nursing leadership roles. So anytime that I've hesitated because of what my current role is has really been negated in the fact that there's appreciation for the various points of view and perspectives.
I think it is value. You want the board to have diverse perspectives, not all to be
right.
CNOs. So thanks for running for that position and being an advocate for all nurses. So thank you.
Thank you.
So let's hear from Deb. So how did you make the leap to join the Infusion Nurses Society Board of Directors?
So like Tracy, I could just say ditto, because I was highly encouraged by a colleague of mine to give it a try. As I said, I am more on the introverted side than extroverted. But one of the things that after I was encouraged to just submit the application and see if you can get an interview, when I had the interview, and it's true to this day, it's a passion of mine, is I want to bring back to INS the voice of the bedside nurse. So I've been, as I mentioned earlier, my whole career has been in acute care. And it'll probably be until I retire, because this is a passion I have. But I really want them to hear that. As Tracy mentioned, you have a diverse group of people on the board, and the representation that I could bring to them from the bedside nurse, from the acute care setting, I think is very valuable, because we do use those standards of practice to guide our practice within the walls of the organization. And there's several walls here in the organization that I'm in. There's over 13 acute care hospitals, and we've harmonized our policies to have everybody practice the same way. And it's been an uphill battle, but being part of the board, I feel like I could bring that back to them and say, hey, this standard, even though we do have the evidence behind it, maybe there's more research that we can do, because this is the actuality of what the nurses are doing or feeling that they should be doing. So is there something that I could bring back and spark some interest in future projects or research that could be done? And I can say that when I had my interview, I felt extremely anxious about it, and I didn't feel that I was taken. I hung up the call and I said, oh, I don't think that went too well. And needless to say, the position that I applied for was not the one that I was offered. I was offered the director at large. I had applied for just the secretary, thinking, okay, I could take minutes from there. I could get my feet wet here. And I was not offered that position, but I was offered the director at large. And I'm completing my first term here on the board, and I have voluntarily reapplied for a second term if they'll have me. And because I feel like I'm not done. As Tracy said, you kind of start off, you're timid and you're not sure if you belong. And the president did say to me at the annual meeting, she called me out and said, Debbie's quiet, but when she has something to say, you're going to hear it, because she's very passionate about it. And so they know that I'm introverted, but they know that when I have something that is meaningful that I need to bring to them, then I'll certainly do that. And so it's such an opportunity. It's allowed me to use the information that I gained from INS to bring back to our organization. It's also helped me gain a little bit more respect from my colleagues here at the organization. In fact, not long ago, somebody said, oh, I know your name. You're our IV guru. You're the person that we go to for all IV information. And so this is important, because I didn't know that person. They were from the network, and I don't know everybody. And so that was encouraging for me to hear that I'm making a little bit of a difference. And the only way that I'm making that difference is being part of the INS and being able to bring back the important information to everyone.
Well, thanks to both of you for sharing that. And do you see being president of the organization in the future? Sounds like you both have the qualities for it.
Putting them on the spot.
Yes.
Maybe someday. Again, I think it's really hard to overcome that self-doubt of, am I good enough? Right? I think as nurses, we don't like to not do well. We like to do our job well. We expect a high quality performance. And for me personally, I'm always worried, what if I fall short of that? What if I disappoint somebody? So while people around me would say, of course, Tracy would be the president of whatever she was involved in, there's always that little bit of self-doubt that says, well, I don't know, maybe eventually.
Well, maybe I just planted the seed for both of you.
I was going to say, you're pretty good at that. So, yeah, definitely something that possibly in the future. Right now, looking forward to the possibility of doing a second term and then moving along as I go and gain a little bit more of a comfort level, being able to speak up and being able to see, am I worthy of that position as president? So yeah, more to come on that.
Switching gears slightly, just talking about there are numerous nursing organizations out there. And Tracy, you've talked about being a part of at least two of them. If you could each speak about how many you were in, it kind of goes along with the question that you just asked about pursuing another role or pursuing a role as president. There's a bandwidth consideration too. How much time can you give? So what is your recommendation to nurses out there as far as which organizations should a nurse consider joining?
I would say that there's not one best. It's not a cookie cutter. One doesn't fit each individual. As Tracy had said earlier, you have to find your niche. What is it that you are interested in? And I would say to start there. As I said, I'm part of INS. I'm on the board of INS now, active member of INS, but I'm also a member of ONS. I am a member, not as active as I am with INS, because INS, the infusion part of it has been my passion, right? And also the American Nurses Association. So you pick and choose what works for you and what you get from the organization and what you have to offer them. So I would say it's hard to just pinpoint it to one or five or three. It's going to be an individual decision made by the nurse, but you need to start somewhere. And start with what sparks your interest first and then move on from there.
Yeah. And I would say for me, when I first entered into nursing after graduation, I joined AWON as a women's health obstetrical nurse. That's what I joined. AWON is the Association of Women's Health Obstetric and Neonatal Nurses.
A lot easier to say AWON.
A lot easier to say AWON, but it's really great because it pulls people from all of that women's health specialty, women's health, obstetrical care, neonatal care, and it's a really, really great organization that's focused on making sure that we have positive outcomes, positive patient outcomes and safe care. So when I'm mentoring students, those women's health and midwifery students, they tend to find me. And I love that I can refer them to the organization and let's look at standards, let's look at practice guidelines with that. So for me, I felt that that was going to help guide my practice. It was going to help me become more familiar with those guidelines and recommendations. It was going to be a source that as a new nurse, that's where I was going to need my information from. I've always maintained that membership, but I really thought about, like I mentioned earlier, eventually what was I aspiring to do? Once I got bitten by the leadership bug and was invited to ONE, I said, this is really of interest to me. So I really found balance between keeping up with my specialty professional organization, but then also focusing on my future development in roles that I hope to have, and became involved with the nursing leadership organization. But I think in terms of other organizations that I'm involved in, I think that as a nurse leader, it's really important that we are aware of what's happening in the political landscape And I know that some professional organizations just dip their toe into it. Some are all in on it and really focus on advocacy and having an active voice in guiding legislation. So I think that for me, where I am in my career, the role that I have, that is something over the past couple of years I've really leaned into, and that I'm able to do both with being on the board at ONL, but also with my committee involvement with the New Jersey State Nurses Association. Because again, I mentioned this earlier, there are folks that are making decisions as to how we practice, no matter what our role is, whether it's as a nurse, whether it's a nurse in a hospital, whether it's academia, whether it's as an advanced practice nurse, and it's affecting what we do. So as nurses, as leaders, we need to be aware and we need to be able to influence those decisions using the best evidence. So for me, I would say my active enrollment is in 2 or 3 professional organizations, but they're very strategic. They're very intentional. I also happen to be a fellow of the American Academy of Nursing since last year. And that is something, still a new member and learning about the organization and learning about how to become involved in that as well. So I think that for me, those are my priority organizations. But you have to be intentional with it, because just as we started the podcast, it could be cost prohibitive for folks. So you want to be very intentional with your time and your money.
Well, thanks for sharing so many of the benefits of being member of a professional organization. And as we start to conclude our podcast, I just want to take a little broader perspective. We've talked about how it benefited you and your career. How do professional organizations benefit our nursing profession? And Tracy, you started to touch on that. But Deb, being a member of INS, does that help advance the nursing profession? And if so, how? How is it doing that?
Absolutely. I know at the board level, we're, as Tracy also mentioned, we are looking at what's out there in the legislation and seeing, do we need to have an active role in it? But for the nurse that is just joining, to be part of the organization will help lead them in the right direction. Whether it's that question of, is this the way we should be practicing? What is the evidence out there? We talked earlier how you don't have to go looking for it. They've already given it to you. So look at those, for example, the INS standards of practice. Go to it and look to see what's there. They always list all of the references. You can pull those references and further educate yourself. So I think they do encourage the nurse to look further into things, to look at the research that's out there, to look at that evidence, and to really guide their practice in the right direction. So I do believe it has a major impact on that. And whether it's, like I said, INS, it could be ONS for the oncology nurses, for them to see a new nurse coming out or a seasoned nurse that's out there. Is this practice been something that we should be doing? Or I'm not sure what I should be doing. Where do I go? And so I definitely believe that, within the walls of your own organization or practice area that you're at, or academia, wherever it may be, looking to that professional organization, because they're the ones gathering that and really handing it to you. You don't have to do the work. And so take advantage of it, use it, let it help you guide your practice. And so it is absolutely beneficial to be part of those organizations.
Thanks, Deb. And how about you, Tracy? How is ONL NJ advancing our profession?
So I think it's helping us rise to the challenge. We have to be aware as nursing leaders of what the issues are that are facing our nurses and facing our patients, and then help strategize for how to deal with that. If we think about nursing leaders, we're dealing with staffing challenges. We're dealing with burnout. We're dealing with, do the nurses have the resilience that they need? So from a workforce standpoint, how are we supporting each other in our nursing roles? But we also focus on the patients, right? We're all nurses, but the bottom line is we are there for the patients. and they become our priority. So if we can equip our nurses with the resources that they need, regardless of their role, that trickles down to patient level. And isn't that what it's all about? Improving the care of our patients and our communities that we take care of. So I think that, while the intention of our professional organizations is to advance the profession, advance the person, the nurse in those roles, the ultimate intention is, why are we doing it? We're doing it to improve the healthcare of the population. And the people that we're serving. So I think that our patients should be encouraging us to be a part of professional organizations, because we're looking at the best evidence. We're helping develop the most appropriate evidence-based policies to guide what we're doing. Think of the example, the personal experience that Deb spoke about, and how patients are benefiting all these years later because of policy revision and looking at evidence-based practice and improving the way we do things. Because my standard line is, I don't know that I want someone doing something the same way they've been doing it for 25 years. Practice changes, the evidence changes. And are we staying in front of it? Are we staying ahead of and up to date with the way that we're practicing as nurses and as leaders? And I would say, even as nursing leaders, I have seen an evolution in the way that I have been led. It's very different than 25 years ago when I first entered the nursing workforce. There's a very different approach to how we support our staff. And Sue, I'm thinking about some of the research that you're involved in. 25 years ago, we would not have even finished the sentence of, how do we address nurse fatigue at work? And now folks are listening.
Yep.
They're acknowledging the problems that exist and that need to be addressed.
One more question that we ask all of our guests, self-care. So considering you have such busy personal work and professional lives, what do you do for your own self-care? And I'll start with you, Tracy.
So it's a challenge. That is one of the things that I need to remind myself to do. I'm very good at reminding my colleagues and my children and my family, put your own oxygen mask on before you can help others. But sometimes I'm not very good at doing it. But when I do find time, I have 2 golden retrievers that are both therapy dogs. I love bringing them out to do visits. It is another task, but for me, it's very relaxing to see that benefit. I get to spend time with them and see the benefits of the people that interact with them. I also like to relax and watch nonsensical television shows that don't require a whole lot of thinking. And I do like to travel with my family. So planning some either short getaways or some fun vacations. That's what I like to do to relax.
And I still have to meet your dog, because I know one of them, he's got a similar name, like the male form of my name, Darius, right?
Yes.
So yeah, looking forward to that soon, hopefully. And what about you, Deb?
So it's funny, we hear that buzzwords, work-life balance. So as a leader, we encourage our staff to go ahead and do that, but are we doing it for ourselves? And so it's a huge challenge. You walk out the door and you think your day is over, then you're getting a call or a text or an email, but you do have to unplug every once in a while. And I mentioned earlier cookie cutters. It was not a snafu, but I am the cookie lady. So I like to make sugar cookies and with royal icing. And it's just as challenging and stressful as it may be with large orders. I don't know how, but I find it very relaxing. My husband laughs at me all the time. He's like, why are you doing this? You're working tomorrow. It's 2 a.m. You're still doing cookies. Well, it's because it's relaxing to me. I've evolved in that, and so they look very professional, but I am a nurse by trade and a cookie lady on the weekends and evenings. I also have 2 grandsons that we enjoy spending time with, and we have a granddaughter on the way. So that's something that I like to do in my downtime. I am going to start learning a new role or a new, I don't even know what to call it. My husband restores old trucks, like big, huge dump trucks and tractors. I'm going to learn how to drive one and drive it to a truck show, hopefully next fall, if I make it there. So I had one practice run. It was very short, He has a little whiplash, and so we'll be back on the road again, trying to learn that. So that's a new thing for me. It's a new adventure in my life to be learning how to drive a 5-speed Mack truck. So,
wow, that's so cool.
Wow.
From cookies to trucks. I wasn't expecting that one.
I don't think anyone shared that before.
That's amazing.
That one.
Well, thank you both for sharing your involvement in professional organizations. And it's clear that it really has influenced your career and helped advance your career.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I appreciate having the opportunity to get the word out there to the nurses, and really, hopefully, Tracy and I have encouraged the nurses out there to just start looking, to join something, to get involved. It's rewarding.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for joining us.